In strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
This is StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh, Revi, and today on The Gist, we're looking at the shifting strategic sands in West Asia. Big welcome again on StratNews to Dr. Alvite Singh Ningthoujam. He's the assistant professor at the Symbiosis School of International Studies. He's been an ex-consultant at the NSCS and also a fellow at the Beijing Sadat Center for Strategic Studies. Dr. Ningthoujam, thank you so much for giving us time.
Good evening, Amitabh. It's good to be back on your show again.
Absolutely, our pleasure. Doctor, just looking at what's happening in West Asia, and this week we've seen a lot of movement in terms of the Israelis. Now, of course, ex-Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu would have probably been looking for that foreign policy ace by traveling himself, but that didn't happen because of domestic politics in Israel. But how important do you see this visit, the opening of the first embassy and a consulate, UAE and Dubai, in terms of Israeli involvement in the region?
Amitabh, it's I think it's a very timely discussion that you have called me for, pertaining to this topic. Looking at the developments in the region, I think for Israel this is a very, very important breakthrough. It's also kind of sending out a signal that its acceptance in the region is slowly on the rise. For far too long, the region has been very antagonistic, very adversarial, but then the opening up of the embassy and the consulate in UAE a couple of days ago clearly sends out a signal that Israel is going to remain as one of the important regional players in the region. So this is in fact a very, very significant development, and it is also about it also talks a lot about the growing convergence of interest between Israel and some of these countries in the Persian Gulf region.
Just saying hi to some of our viewers who are watching this show. Vijay Harangbaum says, has a message for you, Dr. Alvite, saying all the best there.
Right, thank you.
And Sai and Varun Pratap saying good evening. So good evening to all our viewers who are watching this show live and those who will get to see this later. You've also, Dr. Ningthoujam, written a lot about how China has been involved, and you specifically looked at defense exports. They may not be a big player right now, but they are looking to increase their presence in the region, right?
Right. See, I think it's a matter of time. The Middle East it is not a new region for the Chinese government. Okay, they have started giving lots of importance, particularly from the late 70s onwards, after they have started with the 4 modernization drive, which also involves agriculture, military, defense, economic, and science and technology. So it is within that ambit, China is looking to enhance its strategic footprints in the region. While for now we have seen more of the engagements based on economic cooperation, financial engagements, but there is also a clear intent on the side of the Chinese to enhance its military security footprints in the region. And in that process, arms trade is going to be one of their focuses in the days to come. While it may not be a very visible breakthrough for now, but indications are already there. There have been enough of evidences to show that the Chinese government is looking to tap the lucrative defense market in the Middle East. And the article that we just talked about, which was written by me a couple of days ago, also mentioned some of the very recent developments between Israel and traditional partners like Saudi Arabia, then UAE, Qatar, and of course Iran, a big player in the region.
Right. Looking at China increasing its defense footprint, India has also had, like you pointed out, China's traditional footprint in West Asia, in the region, in the Gulf. India's, arguably, some analysts would say one of the best prongs of Narendra Modi's foreign policy strategy has been tackling the different opponents and proponents in the region and getting the best for India. But on the defense front, since we're talking about that, there's again, I remember speaking to the Russian Deputy Chief of Mission here, Roman Babushkin, last year. I think it was about 7-8 months back, where I was talking about, platforms like the Brahmos, which Southeast Asia was looking at, Vietnam, Philippines. But he mentioned that there were Gulf countries also looking for the Brahmos supersonic missile or defense platforms like that. Do you agree with? I mean, tell us a little bit more of, Saudi Arabia is the biggest importer of arms, right?
Right, Amitabh. We have seen Middle East to be the largest importer of arms, like from all the reports, particularly published by the SIPRI, the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. They have been coming out with these reports, and Saudi Arabia being one of the largest, in fact, the largest arms importer in the world. But now, there is also, as much as we in India also do, there is also a diversification of sources which is going on right now in the Middle East. Okay, so I would not say that the US would continue to remain. Of course, they will continue to remain one of the most important arms supplier to the region. But at the same time, there are certain restrictions that come along with the US arms policy, due to which some of these traditional clients in the Middle East, like Qatar or Saudi Arabia or UAE, would like to explore more markets, more vendors from where they can shop their arms, particularly in armed drones, which the US are not very comfortable supplying to some of its traditional players in the region. So the larger, the question is, about the availability of, arms, the categories of different arms at what point in time. So I'm sure that the Russians are looking to enter into the, in a major way in the Middle East arms market. And again, as I mentioned very briefly in my article, the regional geopolitics, the international dynamics would largely determine how this, trade for arms is going to pan out between China or the Middle Eastern countries. Or in fact, Russia also could be one of the partners with whom many of these countries would like to engage with in terms of those military items that you just talked about, AS-400 or any other, larger anti-missile systems, depending on the requirements. Yeah.
Just shifting focus for a bit from defense to the larger footprint that you were talking about of China in the region, and now Iran. We saw that case coming up. I beg your pardon, the comprehensive strategic partnership. But that apart, except for Pakistan, all the GCC countries or countries in that region, if not supporting China on human rights or Xinjiang, they even signed papers. What hold does China have? I guess that's the question I'm asking. That Islamic Muslim countries like that are not saying a word. There's no squeak about what's happening on human rights or specifically on Xinjiang.
See, Amitabh, again, it boils down to the strong convergence of mutual interests, like what each one would gain from one another. While the human rights issues in China is not a new phenomenon, all of us have been reading and hearing about these problems that are existing in that part of China, in Xinjiang region. But if you look at the nature of the cooperation between China and the Middle Eastern countries, there is a strong driving forces vis-a-vis their strategic and economic interests in the last few years' time. If you look at, in the last appearance in your show about a month and a half ago, I also mentioned about the economic incentives of engaging with China. The technological incentives of engaging with China is huge, because in the last few years there is a visible shift in the intent and the focus of the Middle Eastern countries towards Asian countries. Let alone China, like they're looking at India for one, they're looking at Singapore, they're looking at South Korea, they're looking at Japan. But when it comes to China, they have come out with a very clear-cut policy, which is known as the China's Arab policy paper in 2016, which was, of course, after the unveiling of the Belt and Road Initiative in 2013, which clearly lays out the areas, lays out the those areas where China would like to engage with the Middle Eastern countries, and at the same time, from the last few years period, most of the Persian Gulf countries, I must say, are having their own socio-economic reform programs, due to which they would want to have a partner who would be able to engage economically, technologically, or financially in some of their projects. So that is one area which which has bound together China and the Middle Eastern countries. For that matter, one of the lines of the policy paper talks about win-win situation, win-win cooperation. So the Middle Eastern countries are getting quite a deal of the financial assistance, help, and at the same time technological assistance from China. So you can see a kind of a two-way traffic there. The Middle East has become a huge lucrative market for China, and at the same time, China has become a kind of a vendor or a source of import for some of the technologies which are required by the Middle Eastern countries. So this convergence of interests are regulating and determining the relationship, regardless of the challenges like they have been hearing and facing with regard to the human rights.
So you're saying the convergence of interests are larger than, say, what's happening in Xinjiang or human rights for countries in the region to bring it up?
Right. Like it's a, I must say, talking in terms of international relations, it's a real politic, it's all about a real politic, keeping aside the morality aspect of that, the foreign policy, the ethical aspect of the foreign policy.
There's a question from one of our regular viewers, Matara, for you. How is China negotiating the shifting sands? And I guess this is relevant to everybody. Negotiating the shifting sands of politics in the region. Iran, Saudi Arabia, Israel, they all cannot be best friends with China at the same time, can they?
I think this is a very interesting question. See, if there were to be any fallout in the relationship, it could have happened a long time ago. This is not the first. This is not the last couple of years, during which we have seen this rapid enhancement of engagement between China and the Middle Eastern countries. As I mentioned, China has come really forward in catering to some of the demands of the Middle Eastern countries. Like, for instance, which Israel also, after having a fallout in 2004-05 with some controversial military security deals, like they still managed to go on with the relationship. And at the same time, it holds true for the other Middle Eastern countries. So it is all about the convergence of interests, while they are, of course, like mindful of the fact that there are certain sticky points, where they need to tread very carefully. For instance, like if you look at Israel and China, the US continues to remain as a third-party factor. So but then it's all about, again, I would say that it's all about the convergence of interests, the benefits, the mutual benefits, economic incentives. Yes.
Another question for you, Professor Ningthoujam from Sai Prasad, who says, how long would this bonhomie last between the UAE and Israel? Now, it may be formalized now with the opening of the embassy and the consulate, but this is going on for many years, right? Will it be a temporary or a long-lived one? Share some predictions, I ask you.
All right. See, it would be, when it comes to the Middle Eastern politics, it would be really foolhardy to predict any prognosis or to make any assessment. But given the emerging geopolitics in the region, the relationship will hold. As I mentioned, let's not only look at the Iranian factor, which propelled the normalization of relations between Israel and some of the Sunni countries in the region. There are far more areas where both sides would benefit immensely out of their engagements, be it in the health sector, be it in the technological sector, including the defense sector, the gas sector also, So I think both sides are cognizant of the fact that both have a lot to do, out of their, by sharing some of their initial inhibitions, but coming to a closer cooperation on these various fronts. Yeah. So I would say that not a prognosis, but the relationship will hold.
will hold. How do you see India? I mean, because of the pandemic, there's been not so much a movement, but we did see External Affairs Minister Jaishankar he was in Kuwait, he's in Qatar, there was Afghanistan involved, he met Khalil Zad as well. So he has been traveling in person there apart from online diplomacy that has been going on. India, your final word on India in the region.
Amitabh, see, it's our relationship with the West Asian countries in the last. I'm not denying the important role that have been played by the previous UPA government. But if you see, particularly in the last 6 to 7 years period, particularly in the last 6 years' time, the relationship has become very comprehensive. It is no longer determined by our oil and energy trade. It is no longer determined by the remittances that come to India from the our Indian workforce in the region. We are significantly extrapolating or significantly extending our cooperation with these countries in almost all the fields that you talk about, health sector, you talk about strategic oil reserves, defense security relationship, counter-radicalization, de-radicalization, startups and technological aspects. So also the political, this is one thing I have been re-emphasizing time and again, that by visiting to almost all the countries, except for some of the troubled, countries, the Prime Minister has also put forward, a signal that we are, interested in enhancing our political relationship. So earlier it used to be more of an economic engagement like oil and energy, but that is not the case. But of course, the personal diplomacy which the Prime Minister has started off since he has become the Prime Minister in 2014 has worked, I think, significantly to the advantage of both sides. Yeah.
Well, a quick question and answer on India and Israel, India and Iran. There is a question here that's talking about the Iranian nuclear program. Now, India would be looking for a revitalization or a re-entry into the JCPOA of some kind, so that that allows Indian relations with Iran to develop further. Chawar extremely important as well. So how does India do that balancing between Iran, if everything goes well on that front, and Israel, who we have such good close ties with?
I think by now we have clearly understood the weights of both the countries. Okay, with Iran, we have had, as I mentioned in the last discussion that we had, in this forum, the relationship between India and Iran has been a little uneven. It's a little uneven, not a very, I would say, very streamlined or very smooth. But then the fact that we have time and again been, our ministers, foreign ministers, or any other top echelons from the ministry have reached out to Iran and continue to talk to Iran, also sends out a signal that we are still very much interested and serious about putting the relationship in place. And of course, the Chabahar project is still very much on the agenda, and there are indications coming out time and again that we would like to complete the project as soon as possible. Early this year, we have seen some movements. But at the same time, with Israel also, we are doing exceptionally well with Israel. How it used to be very close guarded, shrouded in secrecy for far too long, for a very prolonged period of time. But we have come out of the closet and we are harnessing the full potential of India-Israel relationship, not only in defense sector, but you name it, technology, agriculture is one sector where they are cooperating with Israel full throttle. So I think we are, even the regional countries are well aware of India's strategic, moves with regard to both the, I would say, the foes in the region, Israel and Iran.
Dr. Alvite Ningthoujam, thank you so much. A very holistic discussion we've had on the region in a very short time. Some of you still have questions and comments. I'm going to quickly take them at the end of the show. Matara talking about Uyghur cultural genocide and the convergences that the professor was talking about. Sai had another question on India and UAE and India and Israel. We'll probably get that in later. But thanks to all our viewers and the participants on this show for taking your time out and giving us your questions. Do keep supporting our kind of journalism. There's a link in our descriptor where you can help us financially to also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Dr. Alvite Ningthoujam, thank you again for your time and expertise.
Thank you, Amitabh. It's always been a pleasure to be in this show. Thank you.
The pleasure has always been ours. And just a reminder to our viewers, coming up, since this is a live show, I know people will be watching this later as well, but coming up in just 40 minutes is another one of our limited series. We'll be looking at the Chinese Communist Party at 100 years, 1st of July. That's when it celebrates that, and huge ceremonies with Xi Jinping and all the leaders in Beijing. Well, coming up at 8 p.m. Indian Standard Time, our founder and editor-in-chief Nitin Gokhale is in conversation with the former Foreign Secretary of India, Vijay Gokhale, a China expert and an author now of 2 books. One of his other books coming out in July, I think. Do watch that show. We'll be having that limited series continuing for the next 3 days. You've been watching The Gist on StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh.
As the Chinese Communist Party marks its 100th anniversary, noted China watchers take a look back at what the world's largest political party has achieved and the challenges it faces going forward.
Go by population statistics, it is still 1 out of every 14 Chinese men and women who are members of the party.
A party that came from 100 years ago. Machine, you might say, that rules 1/4 of humanity.
Everyday lives of all Chinese citizens.
Only on StratNews Global.